something, so thank you for having me.
Mate, don't be silly.
There you go.
Thank you for joining.
You're welcome.
Oh, wow. That's very
Yeah.
kind of you.
You're welcome.
This is lovely as well. I've drunk this before. It's amazing. That's really
Yeah.
nice of you, Paul. Thank you.
That's all right, mate.
I've just got a bottle of wine from Paul, just for anyone that's listening to this bit. Jobsworth, Season 2, Episode 3, The Path to Getting Published. Welcome to the third episode of Jobsworth, Season 2. Today I'm speaking with Essex-based writer and comedian and my good friend, Paul Schiernecker. I've known Paul for the best part of 2 decades. We met at college, and whilst we don't see each other all that often, our orbits will often cross at a point where a coffee and a chat is exactly what we both need. Handy then that I've now got 2 microphones and a nice warm office to record it in. For as long as I've known him, Paul has been a prolific writer. Whilst I'm unsure he'd label himself as one, I'd go as far as to call him an artist. Once you add musician, songwriter and comedian to his list of talents, it feels like a title he's certainly worthy of. In 2023, Paul achieved most writers' dream and signed a publishing deal for his debut novel. Ahead of its release in 2025, as I record this, it's already due to be published in 3 languages. We sit down to discuss the years of graft, perseverance and determination that made it happen. In addition to a behind-the-scenes look at how he went about securing this career-defining deal, we also talk about how he juggles his creative pursuits with a 9-to-5 job as a subject matter expert on financial crime, the resilience needed to carry on doing what you love in the face of rejection, and Paul shares his view on whether everyone really does have a book in them. So without further ado, let me introduce you to one of the most genuine and talented people I know, Paul Schiernecker. Take me back then. Let's say Paul, age 11, sort of starting secondary school with these visions of what you wanted to be when you grew up. What did you want to be when you grew up?
At 11, I don't think I knew. I remember feeling a lot of pressure on myself to know what it was that I wanted to do, because I was very driven. I was told when I was a kid that I was gifted and that I was a pleasure to have in class. I was like that kid who is now anxious and depressed. Like, that seems to be the general journey for people who are told that they're good at school.
Right, okay. So again, our teachers are fucking us up as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So at 11, I don't think I had a clear direction on it, but I knew that I needed to work something out, because at that age, and probably generationally as well, you weren't told about the breadth of jobs that there were.
That's a good point.
Was always doctor, policeman, fireman, work in an office or work in a factory.
Banking or finance, something like that. Yeah.
And none of those really appealed to me. And then when I was 14, we read To Kill a Mockingbird. And what happened was I misinterpreted it, and I went down a path, and now in hindsight I recognise what I should have done. So I read To Kill a Mockingbird, and I read about Atticus Finch and was like, this guy is absolutely incredible. I want to become a lawyer.
Right.
I want to become a human rights lawyer, and I want to live his morals, like to live to that level.
Yeah, his sort of North Star, his compass was one that you could think,
exactly.
that's a good person.
And then if you've read Go Set a Watchman, the sequel that came out, kind of in questionable circumstances, where I don't think Harper Lee ever intended to publish it, and there was some dispute over it. She was very old when someone found the manuscript, and there were issues around almost like conservatorship.
Right,
where someone,
understood. Yeah. Someone's taken advantage of...
in that, Atticus Finch has got older, and in the way that people apparently get older and become more right-leaning, he had become slightly detached from this hero that I'd imagined in To Kill a Mockingbird. So I read that. I was like, I'm going to become a lawyer. I went to college and studied law. I wasn't very good at it. I somehow got into university and studied law. I still wasn't very good at it. Scraped a degree. And then I was like, right, I need to get a job. So I got a job. And then I recognised that the thing that I wanted to do was write. And the mistake I'd made is that I'd read about Atticus Finch and thought I wanted to be Atticus Finch, but what I want to do is create stories and worlds like that in To Kill a Mockingbird. So it took a long time to come, almost a decade.
What a great way to think about it. And do you feel like you fell into that trap because of the lack of guidance, support, transparency around what was available as a career? Because like you say, you pretty much highlighted the routes that in our generation, or at that age, we were expected to go down. Yeah. Do you feel like that played a part?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much stuff that I can unpack there around. I was always I always wanted to be like the good boy in my family. I'm the eldest brother of 3, and my brothers are so incredibly different from me, but the same at the same time. And this like good boy narrative that I'd built up in my head, I then thought, well, I have to just toe the line across everything. And that meant going to college and studying like a proper subject, and then going to university. I had to go to university. It was a big deal. I was the first person in my family to go to university.
So when you say, just quickly, when you say you had to, was that you had to?
Me, right? Yeah, absolutely.
But your parents weren't driving
They weren't driving. They were really good at recognising that the 3 of us were different, and that meant that our needs were different. So I can remember for Christmases, they bought like the first home computer, and they made sure that there was a word processor on it, and I would write short stories when I was 7-8 years old. Wow. I wish I had any of those. And I can remember them printing out on the paper that had like the perforated edges that you peel away.
Christ,
and they'd buy me like art supplies, and I'd do a lot of stuff with like plaster of Paris and kind of not construction, but kind of creative ways of working.
There was an
my
outlet
brain
there for you.
Yeah, and now I'm like, well, that's all of those things I really enjoyed. When I was young, I was really into drama and performance, but I was also very shy, so that was a balance to make. So yeah, there was this recognition of the things I wanted to do, and also this need to toe a line that I had created for myself, and is something I've had to unpack in therapy over years with multiple therapists. But yeah, this like good boy narrative that I built for myself. So it wasn't until the other side of university that I was like, right, cool, I've done everything that I needed to do for that. Those are the things that you're supposed to do when we
check those boxes.
Yeah, and then I was like, right, okay, so now I've got a job, and I started writing and haven't stopped.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll move on to what you've done with your writing, and I think I was going to be surprised if you hadn't had an inkling at a very young age that writing is what you wanted to do. I've had some real curveballs, as you might have heard, like my mum's answer as an example to that question. But I would have been really shocked if you hadn't had this desire or drive to do something with your writing at a young age.
Yeah,
so that kind of doesn't surprise me in the best possible way. Let's go back a step, and I just want you to fill the gaps for me, because I'm hyper aware of you, and we've been friends for years, but I'm hyper aware of what you were doing through college.
Yeah.
And then really, like most people, I didn't go to university, so anyone that did, it was kind of just an alien world. Everyone was on a foreign planet, and I was just doing my own thing, staying in my little section of Essex for however many years. I'm still here. So can you fill the gaps for me? So you left college, went to university doing law, and then you got a job. So can you kind of fill the gap from the first job you got out of uni, maybe, and then tell us what you're doing now? Give us a bit of a potted history on that.
Yeah, of course I can. So I finished university, and my parents always had a rule with all 3 of us that you were either in education or you were working. Right. So neither of my brothers went to university. So the next brother down, who's 2 years younger than me, Rob, was working before I was, because he finished college, and then he just had to start working.
Straight out into I'm going to say real world in air quotes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And so I, at 21, had to get my first job. I went to a temp agency, and they had some work going at a bank. And I was like, oh, God, that really, the thought of getting into banking and working as a banker, not me at all. So I picked up some temp work, and then that was based in Southend. They had an office in Southend. And then that position, they were closing the whole of that office, and during the couple of months that I had where I was being held over there, some jobs became available for the same bank, but working in London in card fraud.
Right.
And I had a degree in law and had watched Catch Me If You Can.
Yeah,
and was like,
amazing.
Well, that sounds, if you're going to be in banking, you might as well do something that's a little bit more interesting. And I'd always imagined myself in like the Leonardo DiCaprio character.
Right,
if you're going to be in Catch Me If You Can.
I'd argue that might be the sexier role.
Yeah. Instead, I'm like, a bloated Tom Hanks character. Carl,
without the bloat, minus
Carl
the bloat.
Hanratty?
Yes, yeah.
So I moved into that, working in card fraud, and I loved it. There was something about it that really worked, because the rules around it are really binary, and a lot of the ways that I think fit like that. And I have these two sides of me that exist now, where there's the all business, and that I'll dig into what I'm doing today, because that was 2010. I started working in London. And then the super creative side, which is all of the stand-up and improv and writing and all those endeavours as well. And and they're split, like left and right brain. So I started working in card fraud and loved it, got promoted a couple of times, moved into a wider financial crime element. So you're then looking at money laundering investigations, drug trafficking, tax evasion, and moved into a team that were kind of a little more specialised. They'd only pick up a case if it had a value of over 25 grand, I think. So it was quite high level stuff that we were looking at. And as part of that, I then did a professional qualification and was trained in internal investigations as well.
Oh, wow.
So I started doing internal investigations. So a lot of it was branch staff who had been...
Everyone's favourite person, basically.
Yeah. So branch staff who had been like either caught up in debt or got involved with gangs and were then selling on customer data or making transfers that they shouldn't have done.
This feels like a podcast episode all in its own.
Yeah,
I know you can only share so much on this, but that's mad.
I'm not even here to really talk about that sort of stuff.
It sounds crazy.
And so I did 10 years working for that company. I'm not saying the name on purpose, but you can find it on my LinkedIn. So it's not a secret. And then there was a case that this sounds like so haggard old cop one day before retirement.
I like it. Go on.
And I worked this case, and it just changed the way that I thought about how I'd been working, and I didn't want to be a part of that company anymore, and I wanted to move on. And I'd done 10 years, and they gave me a watch for the 10-year anniversary, and like the next day I handed in my notice and was like, I'm done here.
Really?
And then moved to a fintech or challenger bank, and this was 5 years ago now. Moved there, kind of a sideways move there, worked as an anti-money laundering investigator, and then managed the team. And then COVID happened, and I was managing from my bedroom in my flat, managing 12 people for the first time. I'd never experienced line management before, and there'd been because it was a startup, there wasn't really, I think I had like half an hour chat about what was expected of me as a manager, and then I was in.
Wow.
And then we took on, there was some additional work, so there were then contractors that were brought in, they're under me as well, so I had 20 plus people, I think, and I was like,
with no prior experience, no training,
and I just thought, none of these people realise that I don't know what's happening at all. And I've since been told by people who are much more professional, much higher up, that nobody does. Nobody knows how to adult.
I was going to say that.
Do their job. And then since then, I've moved into more project management side of stuff. So I'm looking at the strategy and the reasons that customers' behaviour is a particular way and how we can combat that. So using artificial intelligence and using data to drive the way that we then investigate the money laundering concerns.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting, because part of the conversation I wanted to have with you is, how do you juggle? Is there, I guess my thought process is there almost this element of resentment about the fact that you have to keep a 9 to 5 going to fund what it is you really want to be doing? But what it sounds like from the way you even talk about it is actually, if you can separate those two things on each side of your brain and you're working a different way, you sound like, I'd say equally, maybe not equally, but really into what it is you do.
Yeah, I think that has come over time, where if you'd said to me at 22 that I would be working in banking for a decade, nearly 15 years beyond that, it wouldn't have been cool, because I was like pushing back against the system and the man at that point. But actually being in a position where I have a regular wage and I'm then able to use that for the things that I enjoy, the vast majority of the time I get to work from home. So I can work on creative projects before work or after work, or both in some instances. And that I find that consistency really helpful for my mindset and my mental health to go, well, you have a structure to 5 days of your week. And then the other side, to be able to do what I want with all the rest of my time, is that for the time being, it's a really nice balance.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, if my agent called me after I get out of this podcast and said, we've got the biggest publisher in the UK who is going to take it, and HBO are going to make a mini-series of your book, you can quit working now, I'd go.
Yeah, the answer is going to be pretty straightforward and fast.
Yeah, but I think the part of the journey that I've been on has then informed the things that have happened to me in the last couple of years. I then really, really appreciate them and see them as being these high tide marks of what I've achieved. And it's not, in no way is it an overnight success, but it's every step of it has helped me grow and helped me reach the point that I'm at. So I'm grateful for it. That's
really good. I think that's really nice insight, and also quite heartening for people to hear that might be in a similar situation where they are having to juggle this pursuit that they are intensely passionate about and obviously have a talent for, with something that they know gives them security, gives them structure. Yeah. And maybe are getting to that point where they're thinking about, I don't know, taking a leap or ending one to pursue the other more wholeheartedly. And you just don't have to do that. I think zooming out sometimes and finding an opportunity that works so you can have both of those things transition, I'd say seamlessly, but maybe, more easily is doable, because you're an example of that. Yeah,
I think I'm so in awe of people who are able to make that leap, because I know that you were working under other people and then you've made the move to be self-employed and to go out on your own, and I think that's so cool, not having to answer to anyone else, and I'm sure it presents a whole league of other challenges.
Does. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
But yeah, for me, I've found a balance in what I'm doing currently. So
nice.
It's working.
That's really lovely to hear. I'm going to take you back in time, back to secondary school, back to college, back to this teenager that is. So my memories of you were always being creative, always with a guitar, or always telling jokes, always being quite extrovert in my opinion, in that kind of magnifying glass that I've got back on that time. But definitely being into writing, being creative, being into drama, being, I would argue, more sensitive than your average teenager going through college. And I would classify myself in a similar way. But what do you, at that time, how do you feel that was perceived by your peers and by people around you? Because I have memories of where I still write poetry. I write a lot of poetry. Yeah. And I used to get the piss taken out of me all the time for writing poetry. Yeah. So how do you feel that was viewed at the time?
I found it really difficult, and it's one of those things, I'm sure you have this as well, where you look back and you think, I wish I could go back and sit down with 16-year-old John, or in my case Paul, and tell them that it's okay to enjoy the things that you do, and that a lot of the toxic masculinity that still was around, even that, I suppose it was like 20 years ago, a lot of that has been smoothed out.
Yes.
But I struggle with it, because there's a part of me that lent into the idea of being slightly outsider, or thinking that I was misunderstood. And I think there's a cliche where I was listening to the Smiths a lot.
I was going to say, I remember teenager. Maybe music might have played a part in that.
And
the lyrics and everything that you're kind of immersing yourself with at the time. I say you again with the broader sense that a lot of people our age at college were doing a very similar thing and really leaning into it.
Yeah, and I think that age, because I'm now at a point where some people that I know have teenage children, and you can see them going through those motions, and a lot of that is them trying to find themselves and trying to find their place and work out who they are. And I have to settle with that all of those things and the ways that we would play out, you're just trying to find out who you are, and you have to kind of push boundaries and wear ridiculous outfits and paint your nails or write awful songs. In my case, some of them really were bad. I'm also, when you said about me always kind of like playing songs or having a guitar, I watched the Barbie movie and really cringed at the idea of Ken playing guitar at you in the way
right,
that he does
yeah. So
Toy
I
Story.
still haven't seen it. Obviously, Barbie is even bigger conversation over the last couple of days with the Oscar nominations and everything. I haven't seen it, but I've heard lots about that.
Yeah. So the idea of a man thinking that the biggest compliment you can give to a woman is to sit them down and make them listen to the song that you've written. Yeah, that's my concern, that there is somewhere in my history a girl or a girlfriend of mine who's like, yeah, you did do that.
I asked the question about the perception back then because I've got, as you know, I've got 2 young sons, 5 and 2.
Silly names.
It's very silly names,
5 and 2.
5 and 2, yeah, marginally worse than their actual names. But I'm joking. But I worry for them in a number of ways.
Yeah.
There's so much anxiety about their future. I think that's just being a parent in general, but also just seeing the way the world is working.
Yeah.
And it has changed a lot since we were at college. And, even the sort of vernacular that would have been used to describe people that were sensitive or wrote poetry or whatever has changed massively now. There's a lot more acceptance. But I still look at my kids and think, God, Finley, my oldest, 5 years old, I think he wants to go into drama. You can see it in him. He wants to be on stage. And there's this element that's like, I'm going to support and push him to do that if that's what he wants to do. But I also worry what he's opening himself up to. And I don't want to be bogged down by that kind of stigma, that kind of self-perpetuating view that I have based on my experience as a teenager.
It must be hard not to dwell on your own experience when you're seeing what could potentially be coming down the line for your son.
It's a really interesting one, but like you say, I think we are living in a very different time where I don't know if you even describe it as sensitivity now. It's just, as you say, like embracing the things you like doing. If you like writing poetry, if you like writing music, if you like drama, whatever it is, then it's just accepting that. So I think that's, and I think without you leaning into that, without pushing against it and being comfortable sitting maybe just slightly left of like what is the norm at that age, you wouldn't be where you are now. You could argue that. I guess.
Completely. And I talk to people at work and they don't it surprises me when they don't have that other thing. Like they have their job and then they might have a hobby, but when I list off the things that I'm involved with and the things that I'm doing, they're like, what? Why are you doing?
Time.
And I think that's the recognition. Like I was an overachiever as a kid, and I'm still trying to hit that. So that's a part of the reason that I do.
Do you think that is one of the motivators for you, that you are trying to overachieve, or is it that you are just embracing the things that you enjoy doing?
It's probably both. I think that I wouldn't do anything unless I didn't deeply enjoy it, especially when it comes to, you only have a finite amount of time, especially
things you're doing outside of work. You want to make sure they are the things.
I make sure that I bury myself completely in the things that I enjoy. And so a part of it is definitely that's what I get a lot out of. The idea of sitting in front of a blank Word document, knowing that I'm about to try and write a new book, is like the most exciting feeling to me. Whereas I know other writers who hate first drafts, who hate staring at a blank page, who get writer's block. And it's interesting the way so many people can be creative, but that creativity looks different, and the way that you function in that space can be different as well. But the overachiever in me, I think, is just trying to get approval, and that when I was really young, that was directly to my parents, and I think as you get older, that just becomes a wider set of people. I think we're all guilty of that in some way, shape or form, to a lesser or greater degree maybe. The label writer, how comfortable are you with it, and then when did you adopt it, or did you start to embrace it because other people were calling you it? It's a good question. I as you said the word writer, I kind of like flinched a little bit. I'm currently reading, do you know Garth Marenghi?
I know Garth Marenghi, but I wouldn't have read his work, and I know he's done a lot of writing. I'm
reading Garth Marenghi's Incarcerat at the moment, and he describes himself as like artist, writer, dreamweaver, as this kind of farcical character that Matt Holness plays, Garth Marenghi. And so there's a part of me that is uncomfortable with it, because in the same way that if you were to tell people that you're a comedian, they're like, well, tell me a joke then. If you tell people that you're a writer, they're like, well, where's your book?
Yes.
And I am able to produce results. I can show the receipts for that. But it's a word that clangs slightly. I think the element of it that I'm comfortable with, I remember years ago, my friend Ben Spall said to me that I should get into writing a journal and blogging. And fortunately, the website paulschiernecker.com was completely available.
That's so funny, isn't it?
Yeah.
I wouldn't imagine.
So I started blogging on that, and then had a conversation with him about at what point do I call myself a writer. And he was very comfortable. He blogs and he's got a website and all of this cool stuff that he does. He's based in New York now. And he said, if you start calling yourself a writer, then other people just believe it. He's like, whatever your Twitter bio is, people just go, oh yeah, I guess that is the case. So I started adopting it at that point, I guess in 2012-ish, it probably would have been. And so I have to deal with the fact that, if people are going to call me a writer,
and we're talking to you, and we're going to go on in a lot more detail about the book deal. We're talking to you now as someone with a deal, and that, if there's any time that you can call yourself a writer, it's then.
It's probably now there is a level of legitimacy to it that didn't exist before.
It's strange because I have this I guess this internal thing in my head all the time about labelling myself and labelling yourself in line with what you do. So I have a problem calling myself a recruiter because I have a lot of issues with what I do for a living and the stigma and the stereotype around the industry. So I say I work in recruitment as a recruiter, but I don't want to label myself as a recruiter. It's very different from saying you're a writer. When I speak to my brother, who's an artist, he's an artist is one way of describing what he does, but he's also a published author. Now, his books are predominantly visual and less written word, less copy. So he has a real issue with calling himself an author, but he's a Sunday Times best-selling author because he released a book. So labels are quite difficult, and they do make you feel certain ways. But I would, it might just be my view, I'd be much more comfortable embracing writer as a label than recruiter. I feel like you should be more comfortable with that.
The downside of it is when in a WhatsApp chat I either something autocorrects incorrectly or that I get the wrong tense or something, and someone now is bound to respond, I thought you were a writer. Like, you can be a writer, it's the editor's job to catch that stuff.
Well, we'll talk about the process a lot more, because I remember talking to you when you were going through, I think you'd done a few drafts, or at least 2 drafts of the book that you've gone on now to secure the deal through at the time, and you were telling me about the editing process. You were telling me about these conversations with your agent, and I was like, no, I would have given up already. So that kind of tenacity and that view to go, I can take notes and I can take feedback and still want to craft something, that has to be like this intrinsic drive in you that pushes you. But we are going to talk about that in a bit more detail, if that's all right. I remember from a young age you started down the route of self-publishing. So how many books have you self-published?
5.
5
okay
books, And do you feel that maybe putting yourself through that process, did you try and get those books out to agents, or did you just decide, I want to put something of my work out into the world, and this is going to happen?
There was a combination there. I can't remember who mentioned it to me, but somebody turned me on to the idea of independently publishing or self-publishing, and gave me some links to a couple of... There's an Amazon subsidiary which is now called Kindle Direct Publishing.
Right, okay.
So you then... Books are printed to order. You do all of the work yourself in creating the copy and then creating the cover, or getting someone to create the cover for you. And then each book that is then made by Amazon, you'd get a very small cut of. And if you were selling on a large enough scale, then you could do very well out of that.
Right.
But I wanted to try that out. So I wrote a book of short stories called Where Did All the Money Go, which is about my experiences of university. So there's 10 short stories in there. And I self-published it to see what that felt like and see how that went. My friend Adam Gardner designed the cover for me, and it's one of my...
I've still got it in my bookshelf at home.
It's one of my favourite things that he's done for me, but we've worked on other stuff since then as well. And it was fun. It was really good to have something that I could send people a link for and they could read. I think my parents were quite upset because I don't think they'd realised how debauched and hedonistic. And at one point, I think my mum called me, having read the book, and she was as soon as I answered the phone, she went, "Cocaine, Paul? Cocaine?"
You hadn't had that. You hadn't
we
broached
had
that
conversation. They're very
for reading it. I mean, that's nice.
Yeah, I know. They're very liberal, my parents, but I think that might have been a bit much for her.
Yeah. Wow. You mentioned your parents. What was their reaction when it became clearer that you really wanted to pursue writing? What was their reaction? Were they supportive of that?
Yeah, really supportive. And I think with the recognition that they were taking me to like drama lessons and doing bits and pieces, and they would read things that I'd written when I was much younger. So I think it probably felt like a puzzle piece slotting in for them as well. Yeah. Where I know that they're happy that I've got a job and I'm paying my bills, and that in some ways is satisfying to me. I enjoy what I do, and when I talk to them about it, they can tell that it's something that I genuinely care about and I'm knowledgeable about. But I think they know that writing is my passion. And my dad, all along the way, because for a long time I was writing things, sending them off to agents, getting rejected, and then hitting like a depressive period, because at that point I thought, if I don't do this now, then I'm never going to achieve anything. I'm going to end up at some point giving up on it and just accepting that all I'm going to do is work a 9 to 5, and that.
What sort of age was that?
I was really struggling with it probably around 25, which is silly, because 25 is nothing now.
In hindsight.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But at the time, I think... So I was in bands when I was in college and university, and then into my 20s. Shout out to Negative Panda Society.
I was just about to say, Nick Pansock. Yeah.
And then that... There was a myriad of reasons that didn't work out, some of which were on me. And then I was doing more writing and wanted to write books. And whereas wanting to be a rock star when you're in your early 20s, there's a very finite period in which you can do that. But as a writer, you don't have that same pressure. There's no time pressure around
the expiry date is far later. Yeah,
exactly. Like George R.R. Martin as an example. Or I know Harper Lee was in her late 30s or early 40s when To Kill a Mockingbird was released. But even with that, I didn't want to settle into just having a 9 to 5. I really struggled to know what I was supposed to do with all the rest of my time if I wasn't pursuing something. So at that point, I was sending off to agents in the post. This was before they had online portals. So the way that it works, you send the first 3 chapters to an agent. They take 2 to 3 months to review it, because it's sat in a big slush pile with all the other manuscripts. And then you'll get, generally it'll be a photocopied message saying thanks but no thanks. Right. And they might write Paul at the top of it, just so it feels like you've had some involvement. And I would get, and you'd have to send a self-addressed envelope to the agent. So I'd then get an envelope back in my own handwriting with my rejected manuscript in it. God, I was like, this really sucks.
Straight to the heart.
Yeah, and that went on for a long time. Probably, I'm trying to think when the first one I might have sent off in 2010, 2011, when I first wrote and finished a story.
So what, we're talking 15? No, 20. Sorry, we're not talking 15. This is why I don't do maths for a living. 25, like your mid. So that was around the sort of time, and as you say,
so all of that stuff.
You open yourself up to so much, don't you? It's a very vulnerable place to be.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, I think, still trying to recognise who you are and what your place in the world is. And I was definitely more secure in who I was as a person then than I was as a teenager. But there's still stuff that's up in the air around it as well. And that period was difficult to deal with, that rejection, I guess. But over time, I built up a thicker skin around it, because you have to.
I was going to say, it's par for the course. It's a necessary evil of the pursuit that you want to, or the goal you want to attain.
Yeah, and I remember having conversations with my dad, because I was living with him at that point, And he would say, well, if it's not this one, then it could be the next one. Or if it's not this agent, then it will be the next one.
Yeah.
He was like, you are a great writer. You've got a gift.
How lovely.
And that's, I know not everyone has that support. And the conversations I've had with him recently, when the news has gone a very different way and things feel like they're finally moving and that things are changing and that it could all develop in a beautiful way, he was like, see, I told you, I knew all along.
How nice to have that belief. And if you need to take a minute, you are welcome to take a minute. But I think we're both, it sounds like we are both graced with really supportive parents, and as you say, not everyone has that. And like my mum, again, going through therapy, I could argue, and she'll listen to this and go, what the fuck do you mean? But all the positivity. My mum if I turned around to my mum and said I want to be an astronaut at 37 years old, she would believe that I could be an astronaut. And like that support and that unyielding support that we have from our parents, I think is amazing. Yeah. And how nice for your dad to be able to take a step back. And he's always known it. It sounds like he's always known that was going to happen. Yeah. And now he's seen it, which is fucking amazing. It's incredible. It is lovely. I can see that it makes you emotional to talk about it.
Yeah, of course.
It's an incredible thing. And I think about my boys when they're older and you know, if they have similar goals or whatever their goals are, seeing them achieve whatever it is they set out to and struggle and blood, sweat and tears to push towards is amazing, mate. So I know he's incredibly proud of you, which is great. So the self-publishing thing, I guess it's like giving birth to a child in a way, isn't it? And then just you're saying, right, what do you think of that? Like you're leaving yourself open to judgment from literally anyone that can go on Amazon and buy your book. So was that a weird time?
It was. I had my circle of influence was smaller, and I'd listened to people who had been there beside me and knew about my writing. I'd listen to them, but then because you can kind of push promotion through Amazon or social media, then people who didn't directly know me started to read it, which is wonderful because then you can see the increase.
That's
in
what you're
sales.
doing it for, isn't it?
Yeah,
really?
Of course. But you're right. You then open yourself up to those people being in a position where they don't have to protect you in the way that people that you know do. And some of the reviews, not just of that book, but then the subsequent ones as well, people were just honest that they'd downloaded it or they'd bought it and then it wasn't for them. And that's another thing that I've had to come to terms with, that some of the stuff I write isn't for everyone, and that's okay.
Exactly, you can't please everyone, and if you aim to do, then it becomes less of your writing.
Yeah,
it becomes very universal. And
I'm not going to be that writer in the same way that the people who I consider to be like my personal heroes and who I look up to, they were never like like a Michael McIntyre. So like headlining arenas. That's not the
very
kind of
mainstream.
Yeah, like mainstream stuff is not where I would ever want to be. Like they say you should write what you'd want to read, and none of the stuff that I'm interested in reading is in that scope either.
Yeah, understood. You went on, so Where Did All the Money Go was the first book. Yeah. I remember you doing you published one of your, and maybe I should have done this with the prep that I was doing for the podcast, but it was something around the travel that you'd done.
Yeah.
I want to say it was called Yalla.
It was called Yalla, yeah. I've got
Thank God for that.
Tattooed on my wrist.
Brilliant. So how much a part did travel play? Because you still travel now. Like I remember seeing you just pop up in a country on Instagram, and I'm like, where the hell is Paul? Like Paul's just gone off again. How much does travel play a part in that creative process? Do you think it's important?
Yeah, it is. And you won't know this because I'm taking this month off of social media, but I've just got back from Slovenia. And
I think you did mention it to me. I wouldn't know. It's Lake Bled, yeah? Did you go to Lake Bled?
We didn't make it to Lake Bled.
Right, okay, sorry.
But I think when we spoke, I had the intention of going to Lake Bled.
Yeah, understood.
And even while I was there, it was so incredible. I'd never been anywhere that was... I've been to cold places because I've been to Mongolia, but the ice and the snow there was incredible. And then we were staying in an accommodation in the mountains, and each morning you'd wake up and go and watch the sunrise, And just seeing the sunrise over these white peaks just reminded me of all the other travel experiences I've had where you just go, wow, the world is incredible and I'm so lucky to be here and to be a part of it. And that makes all the difference compared to the days where you get up and it's grey in Southend and you trudge down to Cafe Nero and you order some sludge and then you go back to your desk and you're like, why is any of this happening to any of us?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
a very good way of putting it. Yeah.
Travel, there was a part of me that wanted to become a travel writer exclusively after writing Yalla. So Yalla was about my experiences walking in the Sahara Desert. A group of us did 100 kilometres of the Sahara for charity. And this was over a decade ago, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like 25. And that was the first time I'd been out of Europe. It was the first time that I'd done backpacking or serious travel in that sense. And similar thing, I remember that was the first time I'd seen the Milky Way. I'd never been anywhere where there wasn't light pollution.
Wow.
And I looked up, I was like, what the fuck is going on? That's the Milky Way, Paul. That's what's going on up there.
Wow.
Yeah, and all of that feeds into the things that I write, and I feel more comfortable now putting elements of travel or other countries into my writing because I've experienced a little more in 37 years than I had at 22 when I first started writing.
Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And then I was always interested in how travel, because I think the more we travel, the more we expose ourselves to different parts of the world, both culturally, the cultural sensitivity and different people we meet along the way, or just different experiences of living start to seep into how we write and how we express ourselves. On top of your writing, you've done a lot in comedy, which I am just in awe of you for doing, because I would love to experience standing up on stage, but simultaneously I would never do it because I would shit myself. So tell us a bit about you as someone that has suffered from anxiety, suffered from depression. It doesn't always, I think we hear about a lot of comics and their backstory tends to involve some form of depression.
Yeah.
I think that's fair to say. Yeah, exactly. But as someone, let's say, that suffers from anxiety or suffered from anxiety, what possesses you to want to put yourself, and you've talked about the anxiety attacks, almost panic attacks that you have before going on stage. What possesses you to want to do that?
It's mad, isn't it? Because I know you said that you considered me to be quite an extroverted character when we were in college. That is the extroverted part of me, but I am an extroverted introvert. So I have the capacity to expand out and showcase stuff. But then I'm like, right, you need to retreat for a few days and just look after yourself and recover because that...
Do you find it draining?
Yeah, that drains my social battery. So I always really liked comedy, and when we were kids, my dad would let us stay up and watch Men Behaving Badly or Bottom or The Young Ones, like all of the stuff that we were probably too young to watch, that so many of the jokes went over my head, and now when I rewatch them I'm like, oh, damn, Dad, you really shouldn't have been exposed like a 10-year-old kid to this. And but it was just never something that I considered doing, but I'd look up to Rick Mell and Ade Edmonton, and Robin Williams was a big presence when we were that age, and Jim Carrey as well was like one of the biggest movie stars / comic actors. But it was never something that I'd focused on. And then when I started working in London, I was working with a guy called Danny, who was also from Southend, and he went to an improvised comedy show in Southend, and at the end of that show they said, if anyone wants to sign up to do the next course, we offer a 10-week course where you attend one evening a week, and then at the end of that 10-week course you perform a show in front of your friends and family. And Danny not only signed himself up, he signed me and our other friend Sam up without us knowing.
Amazing. Wow.
Sam then, Danny leaves that night and then texts me and said, we're going to do improvised comedy. You're going to come with me next Tuesday or Wednesday. And we will do that. We turned up, there were maybe 8 of us in the first class. And this older, he's now older, this guy turns up, Lee Terrell, and he's like, right, this is Laughter Academy. We're going to, in 10 weeks, and Danny hadn't given me any of this heads up. He was like, just come to one class. If you don't like it, you don't have to do it anymore. So we turn up and Lee says, you're going to do a 10-week course, and at the end of that you're going to do a show in front of friends and family. I went, Danny, what the fuck have you done? This is my absolute nightmare. Like, I was still very sensitive, very introverted. I remember when I was really young, my grandpa told me that I had a very dry sense of humour.
Right.
And I didn't even know what that meant.
Yeah, when you're young, that kind of doesn't mean much, does it? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's only now that I'm like, oh, he is right. The things that I say, because sometimes on work calls, people are like, I don't know when you're genuinely impressed by something or when you're being sarcastic. So we did this one class, and Danny said, do one, and you don't have to come back if you don't want to. And I did it, and I loved it and hated it at the same time.
Yeah.
And Danny said, I'm really proud of you. Do you want to do next week? And I said, yeah, I do. So we did the 10-week course, and the whole way through I was like, I don't think I can do the show. But I then started inviting people to the show, and
it's a bit of accountability. Yeah.
And the same with everything else that I've done. I'll always tell people when I start something, so I'll then finish it. And we performed at the Royal Hotel in Southend, upstairs in the Royal, and the room was packed, and the people that were there that I performed with, I'm still friends with to this day. Wow. And that was maybe 2011, I think. And some of them, like Ross Bishop, Ross McGrain, John Oakes, are now doing more stand-up, or like Ross and John are both on Radio Essex together. And everyone's kind of shifted. There's still a friendship group there, but we've all grown in the things that we've done because of this improv class. And Lee will love to hear that he's kind of had these people that he's fostered and improved their creative output in some way.
Yeah. Do you feel in a way that you had a really close friendship group, but do you feel like you found like the next tribe that you were part of when you landed in there?
And I remember being angry about it because I was like, I've got enough friends. I don't need
and there's time for all this shit.
This happens often enough where like when you start any other hobby or you meet people through work or whatever else, I'm like, but I'm at capacity, guys. I can't continue to grow this out. There's only so many birthdays I can wish on Facebook.
That's a good point.
But yeah, just this amazing group of people, and all of them are there because they're slightly fractured in some way. Like all of us, there's a series of running jokes about everyone being anxious, everyone being depressed, everyone having addiction issues. Like it's just this. It's the people that you'd expect to be drawn to doing something like that, kind of something self-destructive in there at the same time.
There's a bit of a cliche when you zoom out across that whole group.
Exactly.
This is all kind of like following a pattern. Okay.
And I did the first show in 2011, and I finished the show, and I said to Danny, I'm done. I've done what you asked me to do. I've come, I've experienced it.
Almost like a bucket list kind of thing.
I can tick it off. And then, I apologise if I get upset again.
Go on.
Like maybe 2 weeks later, Danny had epilepsy, and he had a fit in his sleep, and he passed away.
Wow.
And we knew he had epilepsy. He was like taking medication for it, but it was the first time, and fortunately for me, it's the last time that someone our age, a close friend of mine, had passed away, and it was horrible. It like you can tell, it still hurts me now. And he was just such an amazing guy. He was like a real light. He was very extroverted. He would go up to girls when we were on nights out and bother them, and I was like, those girls do not want to be bothered, please leave them alone, Danny. He was just like that guy. He was like a party guy. And he died. A number of us from Laughter Academy, and like he was well known and well liked across Southend as well. Like loads of people were at his funeral. And then I just tried to process it and deal with it in the weeks afterwards. And then Laughter Academy started up again, and I think I saw pictures that they'd been together and they'd done that first class, and there were more people there than there had been the previous iteration of it. And I messaged Sam and said, Laughter Academy started again. Nobody told me. And he said, you told Danny that you didn't want to do it anymore. Oh. And I said, I think I have to now.
Yeah.
I don't think I can turn away from it. And that's something that I've dipped in and out of it, but I have performed as part of Laughter Academy and then separately from Laughter Academy ever since.
Wow.
And I've performed with people who've been on Whose Line Is It Anyway, or people who've been on like BBC sitcoms, and it's really opened up this amazing group of people to me, and this incredible set of friends who, even New Year just gone, those were the people that I was with.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
What a lovely what a tribute in a way that you've kept that going.
Yeah, me and Sam often say that Danny would love the fact that he's still responsible for how our social group works. Like that'd really be a win for him.
That's really lovely, mate. So, I mean, what a horrendous thing to go through. I mean, first for his family and friends, but for the people that are left behind, I think there is something acutely painful about seeing people your own age, because it just brings it home, like how fleeting everything is.
Yeah.
I mean, if we can, we'll focus on the comedy aspect of it, and let's
tragedy plus time equals comedy.
Yeah, exactly. I was speaking to someone. No, this was on a podcast the other day. Ed Byrne. Yeah. He was on Radio 2.
Oh, was it?
I'll out myself for listening to Radio 2 because I don't care. I feel like I've jumped on that bandwagon a little bit too early. But he was saying, I think his latest stand-up is about his little brother passing away.
Oh, wow.
And he said exactly that. Tragedy plus time is comedy. Yeah. With the comedy aspects then, how that was already permeating your writing, but then doing stand-up, has that now become a bigger part of what you do? And I feel like we're just gonna have to say what your book is that you've got to do in a second, because when we talk about that, maybe you'd think that comedy isn't going to be an element of that.
Yeah, because arguably that's the biggest tragedy. Yes. One of the biggest tragedies in human history.
Let's do that then. Let's say what the book is. So you after years of graft and drive and rejection, I think that's fair to say, putting yourself through all of that, have secured a publishing deal for your book.
Yeah.
Tell us what your book is called, if that's okay, and then maybe give us I don't know how much you can share, but can you give us a tiny bit of insight?
I've not been told that I can't say anything. So the book's called The Counterfeiter of Auschwitz, and it's told in the modern day from the point of view of George Gottlieb, who is a 99-year-old survivor of Auschwitz, Birkenau, Sachsenhausen, who's in a number of concentration camps. It's about a true series of events, but he is a character of fiction. And there was a Nazi operation from 1941 until 1945 where they had concentration camp prisoners who had a history in banking and finance, who they forced to try and counterfeit currency, British and American currency, within a concentration camp. So they brought in presses and printing equipment from Berlin for these prisoners to try and create counterfeit currency. The aim of the Nazis was to destroy the British and American economies by flushing it with all of this counterfeit money.
Yeah.
And they were in real life they were successful. They managed to counterfeit British currency. It was all, at the end of the war, it was all boxed up, and the Nazis drove it out in the way that they did for loads of the gold and the artwork, and for years that money was missing.
Wow.
And the book tells the story of George Gottlieb, who's this fictional character, as I said, but in this real world situation. So it's his life story through survival in those circumstances. And I suppose the point you are suggesting as to like the comedy aspect of it is that it has a very dark, self-deprecating wit to it, which is the reason that there's been some question from publishers around what it is that the book is, because it's not a weepy survival story about a concentration camp survivor. Instead, it's trying to do something like La Vie Belle, Life is Beautiful, an Italian film, or Caging Skies, which was then made into Jojo Rabbit. So you're taking, as I said, like one of the most horrific experiences in human history, and present it through the lens of trying to find humour in that most darkest of subjects. And this is something that me and my agent have spoken about a lot. I feel that I am able to tell that story because I myself am Jewish. I grew up around a lot of self-deprecating Jews. George Gottlieb in his older years is very much an amalgamation of my grandfather and my great-grandfather. And so that that kind of like curmudgeonly old Jewish man now exists on the page.
Yeah.
And that's a lovely place to be. And yeah, it's just, it's been, it feels like weirdly the most personal thing that I've written, because there's so much of my family history that's gone into it, rather than it just being me. So
I think I would have been remiss not to mention, because we're talking about comedy, and then when you say the headline, I mean, you mention concentration camps, you mention Auschwitz. It's not always directly related to humour or comedy, but I think, I mean, there are, as you said, Jojo Rabbit is a really, I guess a kind of close example about how you can take something that is incredibly dark and incredibly tragic, but find humour in those moments, and actually they can be intensely funny.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. First of all, I just want to say congratulations, because I've known how fucking hard you worked to get to where you are now. So genuinely, I'm like, without patronising you, I'm proud of you. But I think it's amazing.
Thanks, mate.
So congratulations.
Thank you.
It's an incredible feat, and I'm sure it's going to be a huge success. I guess anyone that's listening to this through whatever marketing that I put out there may want a bit of insight into. We talked about self-publishing. We talked about how going through that process might have helped you get to the point where now that you've got a deal. But how, if we can focus a little bit on the practicalities of it, which is getting an agent in the first place, or actually working towards getting an agent. Because I know very little about the process of getting published. My brother, as I said, is a published author, but that I would say that's fortune, luck's probably too far, and Luke would be offended by that. But he was scouted on Instagram.
Yeah,
they
approached him.
Yeah. But for you, can you tell us a little bit about the process from going to writing this work, being self-published, and then securing an agent?
Yeah, of course. So I had written Counterfeiter during the height of COVID, and then spent some time editing the book. And then fortunately, technology has caught up, so you no longer have to send a self-addressed envelope to agents anymore. Most of them have either an online portal on their website, or there'll be an email address. So the process then is to look for agents who are interested in the themes and the genre of your work. So mine's, despite the comedy of it, ultimately it's historical fiction. So I looked up a number of agents who were looking for historical fiction and were open to submissions, because some of them take themselves offline when they've got such a stack of manuscripts that they want to work their way through it.
I guess.
So they're trying to filter their way through that and work out what to do. I contacted a number of those agents and said, here's the first 3 chapters of my book, The Counterfeiter of Auschwitz. And I made sure in that cover letter to say it's got this self-deprecating humour in it. That might not be for everyone. It's not like The Tattooist of Auschwitz. But I wanted the title in there because it felt like it was almost playing on something to use that, and the fact that he is a counterfeiter to then almost copy another title felt like a play on what I was doing. And as I said, 2 to 3 months wait usually once you've sent those off. And 2 days after I'd sent it, an agent replied and said, I'd like to read the full manuscript. And in 10, and maybe it's like 8 or 9 years at that point, in 8 or 9 years of sending stuff off, nobody had ever asked me for a full manuscript before.
Go on then, tap in, if you can, that memory. What is your reaction?
So it's still height of COVID. I was living on my own in a 1-bedroom flat in Rochford, and I read the email and I just started shaking. And in case it hasn't come across in the couple of times I've burst into tears in the space of an hour, I'm quite an emotional person anyway. I had a little cry, and I remember I then filmed a 1-minute video maybe of me talking to camera and saying, like, I've been asked for a full manuscript. Like, this is big. This is the biggest achievement that I've had in terms of trying to get an agent. This is cool. And then I think I screenshot the email and sent it to my dad as well, probably. Yeah.
Is this before you've responded?
Yeah. All of this is before I've responded.
It's great, isn't it? We have this habit of doing.
I then had a panic because I'd edited the whole thing, but the first 3 chapters I had sat and diligently, militantly looked through every single sentence and ensured that it was the most concise and beautiful sentence that I could possibly compose. And that was, you're looking at maybe 10,000 words of, at that point, it was, I think, a 90,000 word manuscript. Wow. So I worked on those 3 chapters more than any of the rest of it. And then I realised that she had read the best 3 chapters,
Right.
and that I hadn't given the same dedication to the rest of the book. I was like, right, how long can I hold out on responding, keeping this agent interested, but ensuring that the rest of the manuscript is up to scratch?
Yeah, wow.
And I gave myself a weekend.
And
I stayed in and read through the book, I think 3 times.
I don't even know. Like, what? Just put that into time.
Honestly, I hate editing so much. Like, if I could just, there's that Little Britain sketch. Some of them haven't aged well, but this one is really great. Where there's the female writer played
lounging on the couch,
Matt Lucas, and she just dictates everything. Yeah. If I could just do that and someone else would deal with all of the rest of it, that would be fantastic. Because I love a first draft. I hate editing so much. I think reading time, it takes me because I'm editing something at the moment, it takes me about half an hour to read a chapter. Sorry.
Right. Okay. Yeah. God, I was going to say
that was going to be.
Yeah.
And each time there's no way that I'd send something off without having read it 3 times maybe. And the first one you're doing bigger edits, and then you're might be finalising the sentences, and then the 3rd, 4th, 5th you're just making sure that you haven't missed anything, that it reads all right. So I tried to do that in a weekend.
Okay. So you managed to get that done, because some people might have given themselves a little more time.
Yeah. I think now thinking about how long the process has taken, there was more time if I wanted it.
So height of COVID, you're saying this has happened.
Yeah.
What was the height? There's a couple of peaks, wasn't there? I guess.
Yeah.
So you're talking like mid through one of the lockdowns.
Yeah. So it was lockdown.
2020, because was there any in 2021?
Yeah. The first lockdown was 2021, wasn't it?
Mate, I don't know anymore.
I
think it was 2020.
Oh,
it was March 2020,
March
wasn't
2020.
it, that it happened?
So
we don't need to worry about the chronology of the pandemic.
I think September 2020 I sent it off.
Right, okay.
And so once I had one agent who was interested in reading the rest of the manuscript, I then emailed every other agent
saying I've got an agent
and said I've got an agent that's asked to read the full manuscript. Would you be interested in reading the full manuscript as well? And a part of it feels manipulative, but it felt like now it feels like that gave me an edge that I hadn't had before, because then agents started replying to me. Yeah. And 5 or 6 came back and said I'd like to read the full manuscript.
Wow.
Cue more tears and more screenshots sent to my dad. And
to the power of 6 now.
And one of them was an agent who I won't name, but I was like in awe of his like really well thought of in industry level. And I'd sent him a book before that was about me and about an experience that had happened to me and a previous relationship. And I sent him 3 chapters, and he came back and said, "Paul, I know you've tried to make the main character deeply unlikable on purpose."
Talk about dressing down. That's horrendous.
Like, that's just me with a different name. But he was one of the agents that came back and asked to read the full manuscript, which was amazing. And then he gave me some really lovely feedback. Ultimately passed on it. Right. But one of those agents, James, then we went back and forth for a bit. He asked how precious I was about the plot of the book, and he said if we were to work together and consider editing parts of it, would you feel comfortable with that? Is it how keen are you for it to stay exactly as it is? And if he had asked me to change George, the protagonist, or the tone of it, then I would have protested. But the idea of working together on something, my words and his influence, and he has been so instrumental in the way that the book is now constructed. I was talking to someone about it the other day, and even there was no device at the start and end to suggest the time period in which it had taken place. So James said, if you set it in the modern day, then put a chapter in where he's talking about it as an old man, and then you see it all as a flashback. None of that was in there before. Right, okay. And it
makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah,
once you put it in.
He's a super switched on, super smart guy. And he's also really into film. And he would say to me, not this, but you know the way Forrest Gump sets up this, then you could do that. Or there was an element towards the end where it's like, not Shawshank, but could you? And immediately we're just on the same page.
Great. And you're like massively into movies as well, so you're speaking your language straight away.
That's a big big love of mine is film.
Yeah.
And it took a long time. I think at times we were both frustrated with the process of it. He would ask things of me, and I don't think I had taken into consideration like how fundamentally I needed to change the manuscript to get it to that point. But we went back and forth maybe for a year, and then he signed me to the agency, and then we went back and forth for another year, maybe. Yeah, back and forth for another year.
Wow.
And last February he called me. I know it was last February because I was doing a run of seeing all the Oscar contenders, and I'd just come out of seeing The Whale.
Nice.
Again, sobbing. And he called me and we had a chat, and he was like, right, I think it's as good as we're going to get it. Can you send me a personal bio and a synopsis, like a one-page synopsis of the book, and we will package that and we then send it off to publishers and see if we can get some interest. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Immediately went to the pub with my girlfriend to have a celebratory pint.
Yeah.
And one of the funny things he said to me, he's like, some writers struggle to write a personal bio, struggle to write about themselves. So just keep that in mind. He was like, it just needs to be higher level, nothing too fancy. And that was like the easiest thing to write, because I'm like, I'll happily talk about myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, we packaged that up, and then it went to the London Book Fair in April. So agents will almost have a stack of books or a presentation that they'll give to publishers, and then the publishers, if they're interested, can take that manuscript away with them.
And that was where, so in terms of timescales then, that happened in April 2023.
Yeah.
So by this time we've gone from September 2020,
yeah,
which is when you started to send the manuscript out, or the first 3 chapters, and now we're in April 2023.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind you've been writing now since you're a teenager.
Yeah.
So April 2023, goes to London Book Fair. What happens? How quick between London Book Fair and you landing your deal?
Basically the rest of 2023.
Right. That's madness,
yeah.
isn't it? Yeah.
Because as I was saying, like, I knew I wasn't going to be an overnight success because I'd been writing since I was in my early 20s.
Because you would have been one already.
Yeah. But I still hadn't considered the time that it would take, because they, in the same way that the agents have to read the first 3 chapters, and that can take 2 to 3 months, all of these publishers need to read the full book before they can make a decision on it. And they have other books that are further ahead on their reading list that they have to read. And I had fairly regular check-ins with James, and he was like very supportive and complimentary, and would say, oh, I've been speaking to agents, or I've got a lunch lined up, or there's stuff going on. But one of the most amazing things was going to, there was an award ceremony. There was due to be an award ceremony for debut novels. And I had been chatting to Freya, who is another writer that's under the same agency.
Right.
And she had posted online to say that she was going to be giving a reading at this event, like prior to the award ceremony. And I went to that event and watched her talk about her book and read a section from it. And I was like, fuck, I really want this. This is absolutely where I'd love to be able to sit in a couple of years' time. I don't want to say next year because of the speed that everything's moved out. I'm like, let's be realistic. And James was there as well, so we had a chat and a catch up. And then while I was there, Freya said, oh, I'm having a book launch for my second book next month. Are you available? Did you want to come? And I was like, yeah, that'd be amazing. So she then invited me to her book launch in Marylebone for the following month, and I went and met, James was there and a couple of other people from the agency, and I was like, again, this is a bit of me. This is absolutely the direction that I want to head in. And seeing those things. And then Freya was really sweet and said, if you ever want to talk through stuff, it's a weird situation to be in where you're at. And I remember where I was at. Yeah, and if you just want to understand it, then please do. And I was like, you don't have to do that. And she said, people did that for me when I was coming up, and I'm happy to talk things through. And she was really lovely. And when things have happened recently, I've then sent her a message and said, thanks for your support, by the way. I've been offered a publishing deal.
That shared experience is so nice, and someone that's like a few steps ahead of you, sharing it, and I think that's really important. It's almost like a mentor role. Yeah.
Yeah, she's really, and her stuff is really good as well. She writes beautifully.
So if you cried, which I cry a lot, so if you cried when you're getting these emails back from agents saying we want to see the whole manuscript, what happens when you get informed that you've got a book deal? Do you have any say in it? As in, do they put something on the table? I would assume there's a contractual process beyond, but what's the reaction when you get
yes, there is a contractual element beyond. The day that I found out, me and my girlfriend Emily I think we were due to have a date night anyway, and I got an email through with the contract before I got a call, so I'd been waiting, and there'd been the suggestion that something was coming, and there was a publisher that was really keen. And then I'm pretty diligent on my emails anyway, but I just opened my emails, refreshed it, and I saw this contract in my inbox with an advance and with a percentage of.
So they've gone that far down the line to talk about commercials and everything. Wow.
And like mentions of how many units before, and like the percentages, and then the audiobook rights.
Oh my
goodness. I think I cried first. And then I went and sat in I have a number of vices, and nicotine is one of them, and I'm always like in and out with. I'm trying not to vape at the moment because it's I can't get away from it, because even when I'm at my desk I will vape, whereas at least when I was smoking cigarettes I'd have to go outside. So I had a packet of cigarettes, so I was like, this is an occasion
for it.
And I went and sat outside, and my hand was shaking so much, and just sat on the bench outside the house share that I was in at that point. And just it was like, had a huge grin on my face, was shaking and crying, and nobody else was at home. I was living with like 3 of my friends, including Lee, who runs Laughter Academy. We ended up living together, and I just like, I can't believe this is happening. This is so mad. And then I went back up to my bedroom and filmed like another little video as another marker of where things have got to. My hairline's gone even further back. I didn't know it was possible, but in those 2 or 3 years. And then I think I messaged my dad, messaged my girlfriend, and Emily said, well, we were going out tonight anyway, but let's like go out.
Large. Yeah.
And there is a video of me at 1 o'clock in the morning dancing alone to New York by Frank Sinatra, doing the kicks.
Oh, amazing,
doing the kicks, mate. And singing.
Wow. Well, if you can't do it then, when can you?
Yeah, exactly. Great. So that was the day I got the contract through.
And did you feel like, I guess there's a way to go until you've got a physical copy of the book in your hand. Maybe that's when you feel like you've completed it. But what was that sense of achievement like? Do you get to that point? Is there any kind of catharsis that's what I was trying to do?
That's a really good question, because this is something that I remember talking to my therapist about, because I don't think that I'm ever going to be satisfied, and that's something that we talked about, and she said you're going to have to deal with this, that's a thing that you're never going to be able to handle. You'll never complete the list. You'll never be completely satisfied. And I've mentioned this anecdote before, and it's like second or third hand by the time it gets to me. Matt Damon won the Oscar for Good Will Hunting, for writing Good Will Hunting. Supposedly Ben Affleck was there, but I think Matt Damon did most of the work. Come on. Matt Damon has the Oscar in his hand. He goes to an after party. He goes into the toilet. He puts the Oscar up on the side, like unzips, and is taking a piss, and he's like, fuck, I've got an Oscar, but I still have to piss. Like life carries on. You still have all of the same things to deal with. You've just also got an Oscar as well. And I think, not comparing this to having an Oscar, but it is like a huge personal win. It felt so gratifying, but I think it will feel incredible when I can hold a copy of the book. But I am someone who reaches the end of a project and is like, right, what's next? Yeah. And that's probably another thing that I should be unpacking a little more in therapy, because the Counterfeiter of Auschwitz is moving down the line, and all of my current focus is on the next book, which I'd like to be in a position to follow up, and that it will then generate interest, and that things will continue to stick on the line.
Because there's an element of being on the conveyor belt now to a degree, as in you've got momentum.
Yeah, and I would love to keep that momentum up, and it doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like I've been knocking on the door for a long time. Someone's finally answered, and I'm like, please look at all of my shiny things all at the same time.
Yeah, look what else I've got in the locker.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Wow, man, that's such cool. But I think it's a really important, and I think probably common thing that happens to people. You put all this energy and love and time invested into a goal that you think you're going to get there and feel like there's just going to be this relief. But I know from my own experience, maybe in setting up the business or getting to a point where the business is kind of self-sufficient and that I'm not worried it's going to collapse every day. And I get there and I'm like, it's almost like climbing the rungs of a ladder. There's always another place for you to go. Mm-hmm. And it's getting the balance between giving yourself that moment, give yourself that time to acknowledge the achievement. Yeah. But I don't think you can, because if you stop now, like, what does that mean for you moving forward? You've got momentum, you need to keep pushing. So it's a very fine balance, I think, you have to strike. But it's really interesting to have known that journey you've been on. I know we've used the word journey a lot, and I tend to in these podcasts, but the journey you've been on, you get to a point where all of that work has culminated in you have a book deal. You're going to have a physical copy of your book in bookshops. That's huge.
Yeah, it's massive.
But you're left feeling like, what's next?
Yeah, exactly. And it's really, it's an odd feeling because it almost sounds super ungrateful. Like I don't.
It can. I think to some people it will. To some people it will. You can't get away from that. For me, on a personal level, and I think a lot of people that maybe think in the same way that I do, it doesn't, because it resonates and you can relate to it. Yeah. But it could potentially.
Yeah. But I suppose that's more of a me thing where nothing is ever. I think I just have to settle with the fact that nothing is ever going to be that peak of achievement that I am so desperate for any number of reasons.
Yeah, and then it goes back to the cliche, doesn't it? It's like it's the journey. It's not the destination. Like everything is about how you're doing and how you're working and the experience you have along the way. Yeah. If you're focused too much on where you're getting to, there's always going to be that crushing sense of, is this it? Yeah. Is this it? No, so okay. Yeah, I thought it was important to at least ask the question, do you feel like you've completed it? I'm going to ask for some advice now for people listening to this, because again, I would like to assume that people that may be in a similar position to yourself or budding writers are interested in tips or some advice. So I will ask a very cliche podcast question of what is, you don't have to give me the one piece of advice, but could you give some advice to budding writers or creatives that would like to be in a position where they are pushing a project, be that book, be that music, be that whatever? Like, what's your advice? I think it's really a part of it is really individual. Like when I tell people what my day looks like if I'm writing and also working on something, when I say writing and working on something, like writing a personal project or writing a book and then also working my 9 to 5. Yeah. Though that timescale looks different for me than it would for anyone else, but ultimately, if you want to write something, or if you want to shoot a film, or finish a script, or write a song, or anything like that, it's just to sit in the chair, like be in front of your computer or sat with your instrument or whatever else it happens to be, and carve out the time to make that happen. Like there are things that I've had to sacrifice to be able to do this. I'm fortunate that I have a job where I can work from home, so if I log on at 9 o'clock on the dot, that means that from when I wake up until 9 o'clock is entirely my own time, and that isn't the case for everyone. If you've got dependents or partners or anything else going on in your life, then it's obviously going to look different. But yeah, all I can say is like sit in the chair. Yeah, it's a really good point. It's like, it's again, if you wrap that up in a cliche, it's like you've got to be in it to win it. You have to really commit to the task at hand. Yeah. And so many people, I'm one of them, and I'm going to ask you another question in a second. Yeah. I'm one of these people that would love to write something, but I also do not I mean, you know this because we've spoken about it so much, but I don't prioritize it. And it's nothing about I don't have the time, because I have time to do, like I've rediscovered a love for painting Warhammer. Like, you'll know Warhammer from school. Yeah, of course. I prioritize that over writing, and I actually get a lot of joy from it. And it's one of these things from a mindfulness perspective, in the same way that when I get flow when I'm writing, nothing beats it, because you are literally it's like a transcendent experience when you're in your flow state, and it just happens that painting small army men is my thing at the moment. So I think it's really important. If you want something enough, you have to sacrifice other things and commit the time to it. One of these sort of old adages that are about writers is that everyone has a book in them. Yeah. What's your reaction to that? What do you think about that statement? Do you think it's true?
I do, yeah. And I know, so as you said, I call myself a writer, and therefore a lot of friends have said, I wish I could write. I'm like, you absolutely can. Like, yes, it's taken me a long time to get to this point, but everyone has the ability to. It's so difficult because I'm like, that's from a position of real privilege, isn't it?
You've got to speak from the position you're in.
Exactly.
I think.
I think everyone has a story to tell, and if the stars align and you're able to sit and craft that into a book, then absolutely everybody does. I find it really difficult when people tell me things like anecdotes or like funny little stranger than fiction elements of their lives, not to take a note of it and think, well, I'll use that one day in something that's
cherry pick, like magpie.
Exactly. I think everyone has the capacity to write, and it's the same as anything else. It's like the 10,000 hours thing.
Yes, yeah.
Malcolm Gladwell, I think.
This wasn't actually going to be a topic I was going to raise, but now it feels like it makes sense to, because we've talked about the adage, everyone has a book in them. Your answer to that is yes, or a story to tell. I think to probably be more specific. And I don't want to make this about AI, but with the introduction of AI, how are you feeling about it and how people are using it to create creative writing or any writing of any description?
It's really interesting what AI is currently capable of doing and what it has the potential to do in the future, and I definitely think it has a space for being able to potentially like free up human time. Within that, there is also the concern that it's going to take human jobs, whether those are like copywriting or slightly more creative forms of writing, through to the stuff that's happened recently with the writer strikes and the actor strikes in America. That side of things is scary, because someone sent me a link for I think a company, it was called like Story Engine, where you put in a synopsis and it will then write you a book based on the synopsis that you've given it, chapter by chapter. And that premise to me at the moment is terrifying. Is it possible that there could come a point where we have AI generated creative works that are recognized as such, and you also have like human creative elements? I think you're being very sort of diplomatic about it. That's exactly where I have to tread on it. I think because for work we're looking at AI solutions to things, but that's very different to... It is, and
I'm really talking about, because I'm from a family of creatives, and they are... Mum makes things out of mud, as anyone that would know if they listen to that episode. Luke is, much more pen and ink, but creativity, as we've been discussing, in its written form, I think is under a threat. I started a creative writing degree with the Open University and stopped 6 months in because I just couldn't get my head round. This was at the advent of where there was all these articles and blogs coming out and just news stories about how lecturers and people that were marking work were struggling to discern between AI and stuff. And I was like, okay, well, that comes down to actually getting the degree. And I don't need a degree to go into creative writing, but that's something I was passionate about. And I just sat there, I was like, well, if I'm going to start putting work out there, like, where's the authenticity? Where's the trust? Trust is the biggest thing for me. Like, how do we know what to trust? So I think going through the journey you're in now, it's just a question I wanted to pose to you. Like, do you feel like it threatens the future of what writing could look like for people like yourself?
I do, because of I think people who see it as like a bottom line and see that there's a cost saving where you don't have to pay writers, and potentially in the future you wouldn't have to pay actors, because you could have like a generated version of that, even that person in the room. That's terrifying, because all of the I can't see AI being able to produce original ideas. Instead, it can only produce something based on what's
been.
Yeah, what's been and what's kind of formatted for it to break down.
I'm gonna pose an argument which I don't believe in, but it's an argument that a lot of people would counter that with, which is, isn't everyone plagiarising something to a degree? Like, aren't we all dipping from a mixing pot of something to create these ideas?
I wish I could disagree, but
I don't agree with it, but I just don't have a counter argument to that counter.
There are, as I said, when my agent and I were talking about the Counterfeiter, the way that we would determine the tone of things is that he'd say, well, what about if you used an Ocean's 11 style thing in this point? And that shortcut for us all to understand is from the common language around creation. Yeah.
There's so many questions.
Now I'm more concerned than I was an hour ago. Cheers.
And I'm really sorry that I've left that in your mind, but I think we can't talk about writing and not bring AI into it.
Completely.
Okay, cool. I'm just trying to think. Okay, this is a topic I wanted to bring up, because the running theme, like the commonality in there's a number of common themes between all the guests in season 2 of Jobsworth, but one of them is that I've purposefully asked people that live in and around Southend and Leigh-on-Sea to come in.
Nice.
And that could be entrepreneurial people that have started their own businesses, people that I classify as creatives and are getting to a point where their work is being recognised and published. This might be a tenuous link, but I feel like I have to ask it because of that common thread. I feel like there's a high number of people that fit those, like check those boxes, entrepreneurs, creatives in and around this area. Do you think there's anything about the area that we're in that lends itself to that or perpetuates that, or is it just a complete fluke and I'm clutching at straws that there's any connection?
I agree. I think there is something. I feel like you'd know more about potentially the entrepreneurial people.
Well, I'm interested in your perspective from the creative side.
Yeah, there definitely is. I know people who refer to it as being like a creative hub around Southend, because a lot of as I've said, like being introduced to the improvised comedy world then meant that I've met all this wider group of people, and that each of them is doing improvised comedy, and then they might also be doing something else, and that circle of influence is pretty big. Like Lee estimates that maybe 500 people have been through Laughter Academy.
Wow, okay.
Because he'll do 3 courses a year, and there's now 40, 50, 60 people that will do.
Wow.
Yeah, it's big. And I do feel like Southend has something going for it. I'm fiercely defensive of it as a place to live, but at the same time we can also slag it off because we know it better than anyone. It's kind of like fighting with a sibling.
It's our manner.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I do feel when I think about the friends of mine and how many irons in the fire they've got, or different things that are going on, it is pretty incredible.
Yeah, I've always just found like the concentration of. I'm using Lee as an example now because I've got a lot of guests coming in that have got businesses either on Lee Broadway or Lee Road, or have businesses on either side of that, in that kind of radius. But I just find the concentration of people particularly high. Now, it might be because I'm completely biased and I live in this area and I would know more about them. But definitely I can see from the creative perspective, I think, as you say, a lot of people describe it as a creative hub. And I think if you look at the number of independents around where we are, and we are, again, fiercely competitive of chains coming in to this area.
Yeah.
So I think there has to be something. Maybe I'll get to the answer at the end of the season. I'm not sure, but it's something I want to.
I wonder if, because it's I feel like we're very aspirational people in Southend. There's an element where everyone wants to do well, wants to do right by their people, and there's like a cliche about Essex that it's like the outward ways that you display your success.
Yeah.
And I
quite
wonder,
superficial.
Yeah, and I wonder if instead the creative and entrepreneurial sides are the internal equivalent of that. You're looking to be an aspirational figure, but it's not in the gaudy sense of your fake tan.
Yeah, we don't want to say the only way is Essex, but we can say it. I think you're right. I like more this kind of intrinsic drive and as you say, aspirations, as opposed to, I think what a lot of the stigma is out there is that it's very superficial and skin deep and plastic, and which it is as well. But Paul, do you know what? I could talk to you for hours and hours because I love you so much anyway, and you're just an incredibly inspiring person. You will know the closing tradition, and it's sticking around for season 2, that you get the question from my mum. Now, mum obviously knows of you. I don't think you came to the house much. I only say that because I used to have big house parties. Literally, my mum could go to the shops for 45 minutes and I'd have 20 people in the house by the time she got back. You definitely came to a couple of those.
Yeah, I can remember very early into our friendship, somehow I ended up...
Was it a fancy dress one? I feel like it was my 17th birthday.
Did you have a toga? Was it toga?
No, you came in togas as part of the fancy dress. Didn't you have a toga party?
Yeah, I did have a toga party.
Because I came to that one.
Right, yeah, of course.
Anyway, I mean, I'm raising my mum because she's about to ask a question, which obviously I haven't heard, so I'm going to play it down the microphone.
I'm excited.
See if I can get the volume right straight away. I'm always rolling the dice a little bit on this one.
Hi, Paul. I was really pleased to hear of your book deal. How did you go out and celebrate? Hope it was good. Thanks.
She's so cute.
That's really
My
adorable.
mum's so cute. I talked to her about these questions retrospectively, and I say, do you write them down? Because it sounds like they're scripted, but it's just, I mean, my mum doesn't sound like a robot, as anyone would know, but that's her question. So how did you celebrate? Question. You kind of inferred that it ended at 1 o'clock in the morning with you doing New York dancing.
Yeah. So there was that night out, and I think I've said that there will be other celebrations. There will be things that I do. I think when I get the advance through, there are some people that I would like to get together and take out for dinner and kind of like do a big thing.
Market.
But
properly,
we're currently at an in-between stage where I've signed the contract. There's confirmation that there will be money coming down the line, but I think when that comes through, I'll then be... I was going to say like Scarface. That's not what I mean at all. I probably don't mean that.
Yeah. It's quite an image.
Maybe like a Great Gatsby.
Nice. Okay.
I've just clocked DiCaprio up on your wall.
Yes.
So,
Staring down.
I'll be doing like the raising the martini glass.
We'll turn it into a GIF.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, and I mean, we'll update Mum when that happens as well, and what debauched
obviously she's
events
invited.
occur. Yeah, of course. Lisa, you heard that. You're invited. Paul, thank you so much.
It's been
a real pleasure.
It's been wonderful.
Cheers, Mum. Thanks for listening to Jobsworth. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to like and subscribe. You can stay connected by following me on LinkedIn for more insights on the world of work, behind the scenes content, and updates on upcoming episodes.